How many of you guys have seen my weekly feature, My Biggest Mistake and How I Fixed It? Oh, great. The column started 5 years ago at the Plain Dealer. It was in the Business Monday section, and until we killed the Business Monday section recently, a few months ago. And now it runs on every Sunday on the second page of the business section. The idea for a book was not mine, first of all. I was writing this column for about 6 months, 5 years ago, and I got a call from the publisher, Orange Fraser Press, in Wilmington, Ohio. You never know who's reading your stuff. And I really thought it was a crank call. So I kind of blew her off a little bit because I thought, well, it's not even my material, but if you're interested, call the editor. And she did, and she followed up. And that's how it all started. And but I'm excited about it. This is the book. It's called My Biggest Mistake and How I Fixed It: Lessons from the Entrepreneurial Front Lines. It's a book filled with humble entrepreneurs who share mistakes they made, but they're all mistakes that they fixed. They're in all sorts of industries. I've written about people who are in the hair care industry, landscaping, professional service firms, auto dealers, auto repair shops, technology, manufacturing. I've even written about wineries. It really runs the gamut about the types of people, home-based businesses from 1 to 200 employees. The stories are all uniquely different, but they all have a lot of common threads, like trusting too much in partners, or maybe too little in employees, like a lack of effective planning, or maybe having tunnel vision. Maybe they're not recognizing their limitations, or they're losing the sight of the fact that profit's more important than growth. You know, whether the story's about being forced to fire your own father, who started the company 30 years earlier, you can find that in here in the family chapter, or ending a bad partnership, or maybe it's about a startup business who got in over their head with the coveted first big order. Or maybe it's the new business owners who find that, it takes just a lot more to make a business go than a hobby. And it can get over their head with when it comes to needing to expand. You got to buy machines, you got to get employees, and it just doesn't take much to get in over your head pretty fast. Or maybe it's the long-time business owner who shares a valuable lesson about targeted marketing or growing too fast. There's not a single business person, large or small, who can't relate to these stories. For aspiring entrepreneurs, it's a roadmap to success. There's really nothing new, in terms of, mistakes and failures. I don't know. I think sometimes let me just say, Thomas Edison, you know what? He had probably more influence on the millennium than anybody. Of course, about the light bulb, but he had so many other successes. But you know what we don't talk about? Is that he had thousands of patents, and he had lots and lots of failures, too, that you never even heard about. He saw those risks and attempts as gifts of knowledge. One of the things he said was, many of life's failures are experienced by people who did not realize how close to success they were when they gave up. The people in this book, the people I write about every week, are people, just ordinary people who are in every sort of business. They fall down all the time, but they get back up. Eleanor Roosevelt, she said, learn from the mistakes of others. You can't live long enough to make them all yourself. That's what this book's about. In the 16 years that I've covered business, I've been a journalist for 20 years, and I've covered business for 16. I've covered all sorts of beats, starting out my career in Vegas covering crime, and after that, last 16 years covering business. I've lots of marketing firms. I've covered all sorts of public companies. I had a stock column at one time. I've been a correspondent for Money Magazine for 14 years. I have covered e-commerce for a while, and I've covered small business for 5 years. So, but the one thing I've learned in all of those years of covering business is that small business is the heartbeat of the economy. Of the approximately 25 million businesses in this country, 99.9% have fewer than 500 employees. For my purposes in my column, I focus on, it's just a personal choice because everyone's definition of small business is different, but I focus on companies that have 1 to 200 employees. You know, in this economy with layoffs and buyouts announced all the time, you might have read in our paper, it's happening even at the Plain Dealer pretty soon. I believe that more people are going to be starting businesses, just my belief. But also means that more people are going to be winging it. This book is a roadmap to success. People in my book do what very few big businesses will do. They take the mystique out of it. And they all have a story to tell. Since this is a library and I'm not supposed to be wearing my newspaper hat, I'm supposed to transition into my new author role. I guess I should read a little something, huh? Take Sean Sullivan. Sean Sullivan is the president of Euro USA. It's a gourmet food company. And you know, he's big time now with 75 employees, and he just announced some partnership with another Solon company, a wine company, and they're selling gourmet and fresh seafood all over the country now. But when he started, I don't know how, 22 years ago, that man didn't think he'd make it a year. Much less of, what he used to do was he used to drive across the country and he'd fill up his truck with fresh fish, and he would pull up to the back of restaurants and grocery stores and he'd sell fish. And it was a cash-based business. So of course, he's on the west side. He thought, you know, well, this is 22 years ago. There's no one having I'll be the first fresh fish store on the west side, a retail shop. He didn't think it's gonna last a few months because he went from running this cash business of, hi there, I just told you about it today, thanks for coming. Because he went from running a cash business to pulling his truck up to restaurants and grocery stores and to open this retail store. And this is what he said. My biggest mistake was not understanding cash flow before I opened a retail storefront. I needed enough money to pay for expenses for 3 months, ranging from rent and payroll for 6 people to products and miscellaneous expenses like truck leases, insurance, and office supplies. I ain't have it. I had huge cash flow issues. I was used to driving a truck and dealing exclusively with cash. Frankly, when I opened a storefront, I was thinking like the movie Field of Dreams. Build it and they will come. I really thought the retail part of the business would take off immediately because I was the first independent fresh seafood retailer on the west side. I spent a little on advertising, but it wasn't enough. Meanwhile, I wrongly assumed that I would get paid when I wanted and that I would be able to get credit to finance the retail side because I had been in business for a year selling fish from my truck. That's not the case. On the wholesale side of the business, it was difficult to get new customers to pay cash on delivery. I had been a one-man and one-truck operation for a year. I was used to pulling my truck up to the back of this restaurant, unloading fish, and collecting a check immediately. Everybody needs cash flow. So they weren't anxious to pay COD. I couldn't carry them. I could only accept COD terms. I was in a storefront for a month before I realized that I would be out of business the following month with a lot of debt if I didn't do something quick. Getting a loan from a bank was not an option. I'm sure you hear that a lot with small business owners. You can't exactly just roll up to the bank and say, I need some money. You know, not hardly when you just start out. I think everybody in this room, though, can relate to cash flow these days, cash flow issues. And money is a common thread that impacts every part of a business. Whether it's, it impacts everything, right? Employees, you gotta pay them, and marketing, technology, gotta have that money. And without credit, it's hard to run a business. But you know what? Money is still just one factor necessary for building a successful business. There's technology, there's clients, customers, so many areas to make mistakes in. And I write about them all. I asked Mike Foyer, co-founder of OfficeMax, to write the foreword for the book. Now, if he were here, he would probably tell you guys just to get you to buy my book or something. He told me that he was going to yell loudly that I cracked the code on solve all the problems of the economy. Yeah, not that far. I wish. But this is what he had to say. I definitely didn't ask him to do it for his sense of humor. I asked him to write the foreword, though, because are you familiar with that guy? He's, okay. He's a co-founder, and he started with just one store. And what was that, Golden Gate Shopping Plaza? And he built up to about 1,000 stores nationwide. And so while everyone's goal is definitely not that when you're a small business, some people have the thought of even adding one employee, ugh, forget about it. No, not interested. Taking it apart, don't think so. Expanding and getting even 2 stores, not interested. It's not everyone's goal, but at the same time, I thought he would be a good person to write it for the reason, because he's definitely a successful person. He told it 5 years ago. This is what he said. People go into business, that would be me. Sorry. That's what I say for the preface. Foreword. There are no magic formulas to making a business successful. Reality is, success requires laser focus, sustained hard work, a bit of luck, and a hefty dose of knowledge. For the knowledge portion of the equation, this insightful and revealing book, My Biggest Mistake and How I Fixed It, provides a valuable perspective on what not to do and why. As history has taught us, pioneers were too often found face down in the mud with arrows in their backs. The advantage of this book is that it can reduce the pioneering phase of the learning curve and help eliminate the dire consequences of those painful arrows. The reader will learn from and be inspired by those who have made sometimes near fatal mistakes and survived to tell about them. You know what? When I think about business owners, though, who have survived to tell their stories, a lot of people come to mind. I'm fortunate to meet entrepreneurs every week, and they inspire me. The lady who just walked into this room will be in next week's paper this Sunday. And because she's a publicist, she told me no initially, used to rejection, and she's used to promoting others. But the reason I asked her to participate in this Sunday's paper is because Cozy is, are you all familiar with Cozy? Cozy is one of the largest chambers in the country, 17,000 members, and I didn't realize it until the last couple of years. They're having a small business conference that I extended the next 2 days, Wednesday and Thursday, that 25% of their members are home-based business, and so that's why I wanted to do a feature, a mistake that involves working from home. Anyway, but there are so many people who have mistakes and they run the gamut. One of the people in the book is Lisa Page Blair. She is it's called Pretzels. It's I think they're in Solon now. It's just a chocolate covered pretzel. And when she first started the business, she was one of those people, kind of be careful what you ask for, you might just get it. You know, a home-based business, and doesn't sound that difficult, the chocolate covered pretzels, and real creative. But she went to Heinen's and asked for an order, and guess what? They gave it to her. She hadn't done any due diligence. She hadn't done the first thing. She didn't know what it'd take to get the pretzels there. She didn't realize that the grocery store margins are like, 1 to 2%. She didn't know that you had to take back what you don't sell. All the baskets have to look alike. You know, no problem. Just call the basket store. Well, guess what? They don't have them anymore. Oh, no problem. I need more ribbon. You know, guess what? We don't have them anymore. So she's driving all around across town and going to Michael's. If you can imagine, she didn't make a quarter off that first order, you know. Then it's interesting, though. What I find interesting is that people continue to make mistakes. It doesn't matter what level you are in your business, if you just started or if you've been in business 50 years. In her case, I didn't see her for a few years. She was one of the very first people I wrote about, and she's in the startup chapter for mistakes. And I didn't see her for a few years, and sure enough, she was on the Food Network after that. You know, she's a whole different person by now. She's got employees, and lo and behold, she was like, you're not going to believe this, but it's almost embarrassment. I made the same mistake on a whole different level, because it goes back to the same thing. Systems not in place. The orders came in like crazy, and this time you got employees, and they couldn't keep up with the orders, and you got an issue still. So it's interesting that you're continually learning, but glad things are moving along, because I was happy to hear just a month ago, The View mentioned her. You know, Whoopi mentions her on The View, so that was great. But you know what? People do survive, and they survive in all different levels. I think about people like Sal Spagnolia of Ohio Business Machines. I put him in the last chapter is called Passion, because that's just something that, you know, you really can't teach someone. You just got to have it. You know, entrepreneurs have a lot of common threads, Risk-taking is one, no doubt. And passion is another. But the reason I chose to have a chapter on it, and basically the mistakes that these people shared, I only picked like 6, 7 people, could fit in any of those other chapters, technology, marketing, clients, customers, but it's their passion that I remember about them. Like for instance, OBM. Does anybody remember that company, Ohio Business Machines? It's a copy machine company. They used to do a lot of advertising. At one point, they were huge. I told you I like to stay under 200 and below, so they would have been too big for me to write about it, because at one point they had 450 employees. That's too big for me. I can't imagine. It doesn't feel small anymore to me. But they lost everything, because the guy who ran it, when he bought the business, he inherited the financial structure, which is recourse loans. And the reason they got to be so big, not just for advertising, was because if you wanted a copy machine, you got it, because they backed them. They could finance their own machines. And they expected to write off so many thousands. But when LTV still went out of business, guess what? All the machines are gone with them. And then when it's insurance company, all the copy machines gone with them. And then all of a sudden, people are did I mess up here? People are calling in the loans, and it didn't take but a minute, bankrupt. Well, how do you come back from something like that? The company had such a great reputation that they were able to come back. Minolta bought them. It wasn't like the company was bad. They just had some bad issues. Some things happened. And so they had a non-compete clause. This is a man, or the reason I put him in the passion chapter is because he could not, with a non-compete clause, and Minolta bought the business, you couldn't do anything. He's no different than anybody else. So can you imagine starting with nothing hardly and building up to that 450 employees, and you have nothing? Nothing. He told me that what got him back up was, aside from those 3 college tuitions he had to pay, was he just couldn't fail. And so he left for a few years, 3 years, went to Toledo. He just had just a few accounts. And next thing you know, he just hustled. And when the 3 years ended, I couldn't believe it. He was up to 50 employees. And he came right back to Cleveland. So the stories are truly run the gamut. I even have someone in here whose mistake, a tire. It's just a small mistake, you think, but it's a big deal. It was when you're a very small business, on the whole opposite end of that 450 employee company. If you're a very small business, you wear lots of hats. Is anybody in here a small business owner? Then you wear a lot of hats. And so this one particular company comes to mind. The reason I put him in here for a tire is because it's a hemodialysis company in Beechwood. I wrote this a few years ago. And, machine breaks down. Someone can't make it. Guess who's on the floor fixing the machine? You. All of a sudden you remember, oh man, the hospital's calling. I forgot about that. They had questions on the contract that I put in. You know what? I got to zoom across town. And this particular day, the gentleman, it's not that he was dressed bummy or anything. He had on some khakis, polo shirt, might even had the logo on it. Uh-oh, what did I just do? I told you I'm a print person. I'm so not a doohickey person. But anyway, so he goes across town and to answer the questions, and with one look, it had nothing to do with what was in his proposal. It didn't matter that he might have been the best person for the job. People do business with people they like, right? With one look, he knew he didn't get the contract because the lady made some smarty pants mark saying, well, I didn't know I needed to dress down, So it was a lesson, though. Just keep a sports coat in the car with you. It's real simple. So it's called my biggest mistake and how I fixed it. And sometimes I think people are intimidated in participating and when I'm trying to get people to share stories to help others. But it doesn't have to be monumental. That mistake is going to help someone. On the flip side, when I think about, I guess I'm supposed to be, I told you I'm new at this author thing. I can talk, but I'm not used to having to read a book. But seeing that I'm at a library, and that is the reason you invited me, so I guess I better act right, huh?
Question and answer is always good too.
Okay. But on the flip side, when I think about surviving, to tell about it, I think about someone like Mark Schwartz. Mark Schwartz is on page 151. He is the president of Nesnati & Schwartz, and it's a graphic design firm in University Circle. When he's been in business how long? 81, and he's got 19 employees now. But when I asked him to participate, and I met him when did I get to Cleveland? About 13 years ago. When I first got to Cleveland, I used to cover marketing and advertising. And I met him back then. And then many years later, when I started doing this column, I asked him to share something. And he told me that his biggest mistake happened when he was a 10-year-old company, very small, but he got his dream account. Seagram's, huge, $4 million with just 10 employees. His biggest mistake, if you can imagine, was taking on a client like that. Believe it or not, he ended up firing a client like that for the sake of survival because it was tearing his firm apart. He was ignoring all the other clients. He and his partner were fighting like cats and dogs. He was working his employees like crazy. They were in over their head. You know, I'll just read a piece of what he had to say. He said, "We've been in business for 13 years when they first contacted us in 1993, but we were still a small design firm with 10 employees. We quickly learned we were up against 3 of the biggest and best design firms in the world, including the company that previously had the multi-million-dollar contract. All of a sudden, we were thrown into an arena that was dazzling. Luxury goods involve a different culture. We had not sought out the work, but we certainly responded and pursued the account aggressively. After 3 months of meetings, memos, drafts, writing, designing, plane trips, and presentations, we landed the job. Our biggest mistake turned out to be working for people who had a total lack of respect for our company, our staff, and what we do. We learned the hard way that the grass is not always greener when you land a dream account." I guess I shouldn't read anymore. I'll read one more part in his story. He said, "Before we got this job, we worked with all sorts of clients, both large corporations and institutional clients. Never had I had an experience that caused me restless and sometimes sleepless nights. It was tough on the staff. My partner and I had lots of arguments, and we started neglecting other accounts." I told you about that. "It wasn't an easy decision, but after 2 months, we decided to fire the Seagram company. On top of everything, we had only invoiced them $200,000 when we made that decision. We walked away from nearly $4 million with the realization that life was too short. For matters of survival, we needed to end this relationship." You know what I enjoy most about gathering these stories from entrepreneurs, whether it's a technology snafu or, you know, they've taught that it's a technology, there's a chapter on technology because, you know, one of the people that comes to mind is someone who learned that you have to invest in backup systems. You know, it's a simple mistake, but, you know, when you're doing your day-to-day work, do you know how embarrassing it is when you got all these clients, graphic design, and you're going to do everything you can not to tell the client we lost all your stuff. You're going to call some printers up. You're going to say, "Do you please have that thing the way that I asked you to print a few months ago?" You're going to do, and some clients are going to be intolerant when you do have to tell them. It's a valuable lesson, something that we all take for granted. We get a little cozy with our technology. We just think it's going to work when we need it. It could be something like that, or it could be someone, a simple mistake of just, the reason I included a chapter on education is because sometimes people are just afraid to ask for help. It sounds simple enough, but sometimes we just don't want people to know that we don't know. And sometimes even that gets people into trouble because they ask for help, but they don't ask the right people for help, you know? So I've written about that even, you know. There's a store in Legacy Village called Lush Boutique. It's right next to Joseph F. They used to be in Shaker Square. And when they wanted to, that's a big jump in rent to go from Shaker Square even to Legacy Village. And when they, what they found was that they really thought that they were doing the right thing. You had 2 sisters running it. One came from New York, and she had this fashion background. The other one came from the accounting background. And they both loved retail, but they hired regular CPAs and accountants that knew nothing about retail. They needed someone who could help them forecast and if they can truly afford it. And they've been there for a few years now, so I'm happy that they're doing well. You know, recently, how am I doing on time? Okay.
7:30.
How are you guys doing? Because I can talk forever, and you can just say, "Stop already," you know. What I enjoy, though, is that people, like I said, fall down all the time, but they emerge, they're stronger and stronger than ever. One entrepreneur told me recently, I write a few different columns. One of them, this is still my favorite, even though it's a pain trying to get people to participate, but I digress. The other feature that I write monthly is called Bright Ideas, and it's aimed at startup companies. And then I write another one, just started 6 months ago. The next one, I haven't written it yet, but it'll be in Thursday's paper, called Women Empowered, and it's women with at least $1 million or more in sales. So one of those women, it was Mertech Consulting. She's an independent. When I was talking to her recently for the story in last month's paper, she was on the brink of going out of business like a lot of .com recruiting type companies, you know. But she survived, and I don't know how, but I do know how. The woman doesn't know what no means. That's how she did it. When everyone else kept saying, go away, we have no business, it's bad times, back off. She just kept in those big companies' faces, I know, but here's what we can do for you when you get some money. And do you know that woman's Mertech Consultant went from, how many, I know only a 7-year-old company, and she was up to about $1 million after a few years, and with several employees, lots of contractors. But I couldn't believe it. In 3 years, she's up to $10 million. And lots of her competitors are gone. And that's because she doesn't know how to rejection doesn't faze her. A lot of people can't handle rejection, you know, they quit. And she's no different than anybody else. The lady has 3 kids. She had a husband that was traveling all the time, and these people blow me away. But she was crying sometimes. I left that out of the story because I wouldn't embarrass her. You know, but she's no different than anybody else, you know. But she got back up, you know. So they inspire me. This one thing she told me that makes me think of the people in my book and the people I write about every week is that you kind of wonder who these people are. Yeah, how do you get it, act like this, you know? What's in you? You didn't just become an entrepreneur overnight, you know? How did you get to the perseverance? And she told me that her father runs marathons in all these continents all over the country, you know? That's one part of her. And she said, you know what? I don't know. I guess I want everything in a hurry, like so many people. And it just didn't hit me until I was in business and knocked down so many times that running a small business is not a sprint. It's like a marathon. And when you run a marathon, you're going to have some ups and you're going to have some downs. Ups and downs. You're going to want to quit sometimes in that race, but you got to keep going. And that's basically what I enjoy about writing this story, all these stories every week. Before I see if anybody has any questions, I'd like to share one last story. Nicole Lumpkin, what chapter is she in? Clients and customers. She owns a web design company. And she started this web design company 10 years ago. I know it's kind of hard to imagine now to have to convince people the need for a website. But let's just go back 10 years ago. And, you know, and if you're targeting small businesses and you're targeting organizations, it was a rough sale. You know, because they weren't convinced that what is this web thing about, and I'm not sure it's going to fly kind of thing. And so, and at the time, she and her husband had a small home-based business in Montville Township, and am I saying that right, Montville? And their company specializes in flash animation, 3D animation, and database-driven websites. And she told me that, you know, they were just starting out, and so, they were, like a lot of companies, you're winging it. You got this talent, you got this skill, but we don't know so much about it. We didn't put enough thought into humanoids, how they think. We trust people too much, for one, and we don't take responsibility all the time for making sure our business goes right. And in her case, this is what she said. The biggest mistake we made was doing work without written contracts. We had oral ones. Because of that, we didn't always have a clear understanding about what a client wanted for the amount of money they wanted to pay. A big problem with oral contracts is interpretation. For instance, you might say that you'll use Flash on a website, but in your mind, Flash means the door of a car opening. But in the customer's mind, because they've seen sites designed with much larger budgets, they're not only envisioning a car door opening, but also a music video playing on a navigation inside the car. Unfortunately, in the early years of our company, that lack of understanding led to situations in which we were putting in many hours of work that we weren't getting paid for. Because we were new, we were particularly concerned about our reputation, so we would bite the bullet and in some cases totally revamp to satisfy a client. We chose to look at it as a marketing expense because the more work we had to show, the more opportunities we'd have for future business. Makes sense, right? Until it gets just a little old. We realized that we should have been using written contracts when we designed a 10-page website for a large local association. After the site was completed, the client wanted to continually make changes, such as adding sponsors and biographies. The problem was they didn't want to pay for the extra work and time, and they didn't have to because we didn't have a contract. I will stop there, and I just want to thank you guys all for coming out. And do you have any questions for me?
How do you get your contacts? Do they come to you, or do you go to them, or both?
Can you identify, so we can know who each other are? Can you identify yourself, please?
My name is Bob Madison.
Okay. I beg. Okay. That is true. That's one of the ways I find people. I network a ton because no one calls me. Ever, do they? You know what? It's a very popular column. Like I said, it's been going on for 5 years, and I've interviewed more than 300 people, but no one calls me. And if you wanted to spread the word, call Marsha at 216-999-4813. I will take it. I have my phone number on every single article. Got a mistake to share? Call Marsha. Got the little picture there? You think it works? No. So anyway, every once in a while, I'll get a call, but basically that's it. And I think, I'm not exactly sure why. I think perhaps the title intimidates some people because, you know, they think it has to be something really big. And the other thing is that it's just reality, it's life. You know, do I really want to put myself out there? You know, I get the goal, and do I really want to tell people my biggest mistake? There was a lady who participated in May, and I never talked to her since then, and I saw her recently, and she was so nervous about, you know, participating, and she decided to do it. But she was like, you know what, I never even told my mom about how much money I lost. I got to make a call first to her before she said, you know. And it was one of those kiosks in malls. You know, she's a beautician, and she kind of, you know, she had 2 locations, but she kind of got bored. And that's one thing that I love about this column is that you never stop making mistakes. You know, it's just different types of mistakes. That's why there's a chapter on growth, because a lot of mistakes happen where you grow in. You know, and in her case, she was bored, you know. The business was starting to slow, and she thought, you know, I have some money to do it, and so she thought she'd open a kiosk. And what was she trying to sell? Flat irons. And did not work out. No, that was her second part of it. Makeup. Don't ask me why. And I didn't mention the mall, but the particular mall that the first one she went into, I mean, come on, it was Max Cosmetics, Estee Lauder, it had a Sephora, it had so much makeup, and then she just got the idea, you know, to come up with her own name, and no one knows you, you know. And it sounded like a good time at the time, you know, when I don't know when, but you were thinking about it, and it made sense, and then, you know, so things just happened. But at the same time, she learned from it, and she emerged stronger. She just bought another location, so. Yes, sir.
I just bought a franchise and started 2 or 3 weeks ago. But it's called Worth Business Credit.
It's called what?
Worth Business Credit.
Congratulations.
Leasing for small business. But there's a PR person from the home office. It's going to be sending something to the plain dealer for release. Is there anybody I can tell in particular to send it to that might get me notice?
Worth Business Credit. We don't write about new businesses just starting out. It's got to be something. It's got to be more than a reason than just starting it for our paper. Yeah, unless there's a hook, a different hook. I can tell you that I actually wrote about. I've written a couple of franchises, just FYI, for Biggest Mistake, though. And that was because a lot of people, this is a whole different world subject, past your question, but since you mentioned franchise, the franchise is obviously it's a much safer way to go, no doubt, because you got the support system. You know, and I can't remember if I put him in here, but one mistake that came to mind when you mentioned franchise is that a gentleman who opened, he has 2 of those Battery Plus stores. Have you seen one out there? It was the one right on Golden Gate. on Mayfield Road, and then there was another one right off of near Sagamore Hills. Anyway, it's every kind of battery you can imagine. And you know what? Even with franchisers, it's so hard to think of everything. If you had the financing down and you got the support system, the marketing down, and then here it is, construction. Construction. Who could have, thought of that, and he had to work around that. But I'm sorry, I got on from the touch it. Any other questions about my biggest mistake and how I fixed it? No one? Well, fine. Thank you. Oh, you have one, young lady. Can you identify yourself?
Yes, my name is Melanie.
You have a beautiful smile, by the way.
All these people that do
Yeah.
small businesses, what percentage can you kind of vote, like what type of work are the most successful? Like those that are in technology, those that
There is no magic formula for success. Like that four-year said, it really isn't. And so much of it has to do with the person, and so much of it has to do with the product, the service. I just never seen it. There's no. For instance, Debonair Vineyards. That's a company that's been around for many years. And I put him in the book because when he was quite successful with the vineyard business, but I think he must be in the growth chapter. And then all of a sudden, you got some money, got some time, and he decided to go into the feed stock business, retail. But that was prior to Walmart and everybody else blowing them out of the water, And, you get in with the wrong partners. It doesn't take but a second that, if he wasn't so solvent with Debonair, he could have taken his whole business out, So it just, that's why it's such a hard question, because then you have some startup businesses that do great. That, it's just, there's no magic formula. It's just the decisions that people make all the time. If that makes any sense. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
I'm not really sure how to phrase it. My name's Scott. Be interested in understanding how many of the people that you talk to actually go through the process of writing a formalized business plan and going out and trying to raise angel dollars or venture capital funds or something other than going to a bank. Have you had exposure to that at all?
Yeah. There are lots of organizations, not lots, but are you familiar with Jumpstart, for instance? It's one of those Jumpstart organization. There's lots of people that try different routes. But what's the question in terms of a business plan? How does that relate?
How many of the entrepreneurs that you talk to go through the exercise of writing a formalized business plan to truly understand their market, to understand their...
Many of them do, many of them do. And then, of course, there's also plenty that tell me they've never, I've talked to so many people, and some of them have told me that they've never even thought about a business plan. Someone who I'm getting ready to write about soon told me that he has a multimedia company, and he said that his mistake was not tweaking it. Because just because you write something, how many, do you have a business by any chance?
I do.
Okay, well then, can you tell me what type of business you have?
I have two. I do an IT reseller business, and then I do marketing and professional management services to startups.
Okay, great. Well, as you know well, then businesses don't stay the same. And so one thing I find out is that people don't revisit the marketing plan, the business plans. They'll start out something, or then the businesses, once you start something, just because you have a goal, or you think you know who your customer's going to be, things change all the time, and they don't go back to it. It's hard to get people to, I was actually trying to do a series on finances, and I did about a month ago, but one of them that I wanted to do was on angel investors. And it was so hard to find people to participate. I actually went to a couple organizations, and I just did not get the help. But
What's the difference between angel? I hear that term all the time, angel investor and venture capital.
well, they're just people who are raising money. It's just not, there's different types of private money, individuals, angel investors, individuals, groups of people who put their money together, who invest in companies, and as a result, usually they want a piece of your company. They're not going to just give it. They think it's a great idea, and they can help you get larger. But there's lots of ways that, obviously, other than just the bank. I remember one thing that I will share real fast is that one of the mistakes, and I don't remember if I put them in here, was I found interesting was a daycare company who told me that their biggest mistake was giving up because banks told them no. banks to tell you no. And then in their case, they actually went to an association, someone told them, that specializes in helping you start a daycare association, and they still discouraged this couple. And they just took a risk. They took a home equity loan, and I find that an awful lot, if you can imagine. Actually, the last few women in power, the other column I write, women with at least $1 million or more in sales, now that I think about it, just about every last one of them, I think, have taken out. All different kinds of companies. Travel agent, there's a huge one in Avon, it's a technology company. Humongous, like 80 million or something. There's all sorts of companies. They all started with these $50,000, $60,000 loans, So there's no magic formula. It has to be the right, the right product and the right timing, It's just so many other factors. But so there's, people don't get discouraged. I can see that. I was thinking about that recently, though, because I didn't realize how many people are actually turning to home equity loans. And as you know, it's getting tighter and tighter with banks for all of us, not just small business people. They're cutting credit lines. So, any other questions regarding my biggest mistake and how I fixed it? Thank you, guys, for coming out. I appreciate it.